Hey everybody, I'm TC and welcome to my channel. A viewer recently pointed out to me that one of my favourite games to test here, specifically Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine 2, actually supports framegen technology built in. They politely inquired why I was not utilising it in my tests, which made me wonder, why am I not utilising it? The simple answer was, I never really thought about it. Until now. So coming up in this video, we'll take a look at some framegen tech, the good, the bad, and the, well, I don't really know how to describe this. Oh wow, this is not good. What is going on here? Is this the Witcher 3 1960s LSD edition? Right, back to reality. Yes, that's just a little sneaky preview of what's going to be coming up later. Stick around as we get into the world of framegen. Right, where were we? Ah yes, framegen. I asked a slop generator a summary on what framegen technology was, and it told me framegen, is an AI-driven rendering technology, such as Nvidia DLSS 3 or 4 and AMD FSR 3 and above. That inserts synthetic frames between traditionally rendered frames to significantly increase FPS and visual smoothness. As the AI mentioned, FSR 3 and newer, as well as DLSS 3 and newer, all support this technology. FSR, of course, is available for any GPU, but DLSS is only available to Nvidia RTX series GPUs, and, well, as you know, this channel doesn't actually possess any RTX series GPUs. So, yeah, we're not going to be testing DLSS framegen, sadly. Of course, with all this technology, the game also has to support this as well. I mean, there are ways on the internet where you can hack this in, and it's kind of complicated, and that's not something I'm going to be looking at right now. There are many videos out there that cover it far better than I could. But there is another option as well, and that is a program called Lossless Scaling, which is available on Steam, and it can run framegen on any hardware over any software, which is a very bold claim. This all sounds very exciting, so let's see what hardware we're going to test today. We're going to be using our budget PC, as discussed in this video, link up there, and we're going to pair this with two GPUs, which need the most help. From AMD, our 25 quid champ, the RX460 4GB, there's a full video about that here. And from Nvidia, our old warhorse, that's possibly overdue its visit to the glue factory, the GTX980 4GB, and there's a video on that here. So let's check out the games which support AMD FSR frame generation first, starting off with Cyberpunk 2077. And first up is the RX460 4GB, and as you can see, we're going to run the benchmark footage recorded for this video with the traditional frame footage from my previous YouTube video about the RX460. The top screen is the traditional frames, and the bottom screen is the framegen. Of course, this is all recorded at 720p medium settings, because that is really all this card can muster in this game. And as you can see, once the benchmark has ended, and after I've finished rambling, disappointingly we see we actually lost 1 FPS. Yeah, weird. Clearly the framegen tech is not doing anything for our poor old RX460. Okay, let's move on. We'll see how the GTX 980 fared. Now, as we know from the previous videos, the 980 and Cyberpunk didn't get along all that well compared to the other games where the GTX 980 actually did pretty good. Okay, let's see if framegen changes anything. And as you can see, here we're running the benchmark at 1080p medium settings. Once again, the top screen is traditional, the bottom is framegen, and once I finish rambling, we'll see that much like the RX460, yeah, we've got nothing. We've gained nothing here. I don't know if there's a setting I somehow missed, or it just doesn't work with such low VRAM cards. I don't know. Please shout out in the comments if you know. Okay, moving on. Let's look at GTA 5 Enhanced Edition. Let's look at GTA 5 Enhanced Edition and see if things are a bit better here. Thankfully, even on our RX460 we can run at 1080p, so we don't have those strange zoom issues that we saw in the the previous video just then. Now GTA 5 has its own on-screen FPS counter, which is a lot larger than Mango HUD in the corner here. So I've split the screen vertically this time so we can see the real-time FPS counter as it's much larger and clearer. So here we see the screen on the left is running the FSR frame gen, and the video on the right is running our traditionally rendered frames. We're running our usual minimum settings with the FSR on quality, and as we can see with the RX460 here, we are definitely seeing more FPS with the FSR frame gen enabled. It's yeah, this is really good. Now, as you might know, the GTA 5 benchmark doesn't provide a total overall average FPS at the end, unlike some of the other benchmarks like Cyberpunk's. So what I usually do is I take the average figure from Mango HUD from the last screen just after the lorry explodes. And now, of course, because I have cut the Mango HUD off the traditional frame video, you won't actually see what that result is, but you can look at the previous videos, it will be the same figure. Okay, so for our frame gen screen, we got 73 FPS overall average for the whole benchmark, and for our traditional frames, that was 59 FPS, so that's really impressive. That's a 23% increase there. Let's see how our GTX 980 does. Once again, we're running at 1080p, the minimal settings here on the Enhanced Edition, which I think are definitely a lot more turned on than the minimal settings on the traditional non-enhanced edition. We also have FSR on quality, as always, and like before, the screen on the left is the frame gen screen, and the screen on the right is the traditional FPS, and so once again we can see the very large in-game FPS counter to make it nice and obvious which is which. Now, obviously this is a little bit shorter than before. We'll just jump here to the end, and the average FPS for the entire benchmark for our frame gen works out at 102 FPS, and with our traditionally generated frames we're seeing 79 FPS. So once again, a noticeable improvement there, which is a 29% increase. That's very, very impressive. Clearly GTA 5 and FSR frame gen are working really well together. I'm not sure why we didn't see a similar result to that in Cyberpunk. I guess because Cyberpunk is just so much more demanding and these cards are just so far below the minimum card you really should have to run Cyberpunk that it just couldn't do anything with it. Whereas GTA, a lot older game, a lot more headroom, and a lot more natural FPS. Okay, let's move on. Let's look at another game now. And now on to Space Marine 2. So first up, our RX460. As per before with this card, we're running at 720p low settings with FSR unbalanced. Now, Space Marine 2 doesn't have a built-in benchmark mode, and thus I'm afraid I haven't got any side-by-side footage like I had with the previous two games. So I'm just going to kick it old school and do one after the other, starting with our traditionally generated frames. Here we can see we're averaging just under 40 FPS. Now if we switch FSR frame gen on, we can see our instant FPS jumps into the mid-50s, and if I fast forward a little bit here, after a few minutes of gameplay, our average FPS is above 55, which is really impressive on this super budget, super old card. Okay, let's see how our GTX 980 fares. Once again, starting with the traditionally rendered frames. Now this is a more powerful card than the RX460, so we can run at 1080p. We're still on low settings with the FSR unbalanced. We are in a fairly challenging area for the graphic wise, and we can see that our average FPS is about 45, but our real-time FPS is dipping into the mid-20s, which is about on par with what we've always seen with this card in this area. Let's see what happens when we turn frame gen on. Now we are of course somewhere quite different in the game now, and my apologies about that. I recorded this game footage at very different times. Same machine, same card, same spec, same game, but just, yeah, different areas. As you can see, we are in a big action scene. There is much Xenos filth to purge here, so in that respect I hope it's similar enough. As you can see, our average FPS is an incredibly impressive mid-60s figure. Now, yeah, I know we're not in quite as demanding areas before, but that is quite an impressive jump. Okay, let's see what some other games have done. Okay, let's look at Indie. I say Indie, I mean, of course, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Fantastic game. It has FSR framegen built in as well. So, as you'll see, I'm here in the options of Indie, and I'm going down to turn FSR on, and yeah, the screen just goes black. The game's still running. You might be able to hear the music, you might not. But you'll see in a second I will toggle it off by pressing left and the screen comes back. So yeah, no idea what's happening there. That happened on the RX460. Obviously I can't run Indie on the GTX980 because no hardware ray tracing and no emulation. So let's just move on. Now let's look at some lossless scaling. Now, of course, lossless scaling is a Windows app, but of course, someone has built a way to allow it to run on Linux, and that's called LSFG-VK. And you see a picture of the GitHub here on the screen. I haven't installed this on my Steam Deck, which is a very popular option, of course. A friend of mine has, and he reports it works really well in the games he plays, which of course is none of the games that I'm testing here. So we're going to kick off with Rise of the Tomb Raider, and as you can see I have LSFG-VK running and Tomb Raider running, and I will be out-tabbing between the two to change the settings as we play. We're running at 1080p high settings here, as well as having LSFG-VK running at X2 setting. And we can see, disappointingly, that's a slight FPS loss versus not running LSFG-VK at all. Okay, yeah. Let's out-tab and change LSFG-VK FPS multiplier to X3. And as we see here, we've got an average in the high 30s, a real time of low 30s, so no different at all. Okay, let's try and go back to X1 and see what happens there. Okay, that seems slightly better. We're getting a real time of 41 FPS. Now let's try bumping it back to X3. We've clearly dropped from 41 to 34. Not exactly doing what one would expect. Yeah, that's definitely not triple the FPS that we usually get here. Okay, let's try lowering it to X2. Nope, still 34 FPS. Yeah, something really does not seem to be working correctly here. 1x gives us the most FPS. Okay, let's try this with our GTX 980. So starting the benchmark again, and you'll see from the screen there on the right, Mango HUD, that we are running our GTX 980. And for some reason it seems to have VSync turned on because it's stuck at 60 FPS, even though in the options VSync is set to off. So yeah, that's weird. That's crashed the game. Oh dear. Clearly not working properly here either. Well, this has all been very disappointing. Let's move on to the next game. Okay, let's look at The Witcher 3, and as before we need to run LSFG-VK, which I'm going to be out-tabbing to, back and forward. As you can see, I've got it running here, and The Witcher 3 is running at 720p windowed mode, because obviously we need 720p, and I thought, you know what, windowed mode is just easier to tab back and forth. So we're using a profile which is definitely not juvenilely named in any way, and as you can see we're at the X1 setting, and we're getting roughly about the FPS we'd expect to see with our RX460. Now if I put the slider, if I change that up to X2, double the FPS, unfortunately you'll see that is in fact half the FPS. And we can also see maybe some artifacts start to creep in. Now, if we go a little bit further and turn this to X3, we seem to have halved the frame rate yet again. Oh dears. And some things are definitely starting to look very odd. Okay, let's move on and see how our GTX 980 fares. Here we are with our GTX 980, and of course as it's a 980 we're able to run at 1080p with a decent frame rate. Wonderful. We've got LSFG-VK at X1, and we can see we're getting slightly below the FPS we usually get, but nothing to write home about. Now if we change that to X2, just like our RX460, we have sadly lost some FPS. Not quite half, but pretty close, and we are starting to see some artifacts creep in here. Okay, let's go and try X3 and see what happens there. No, that's starting to look quite trippy now, and we're down to 20 FPS. Not good at all. Okay, let's pop to X4 and see if that's going to save us. And oh dear God, no, what is going on here? Is this the Witcher 3 LSD edition? Wow. Oh, okay, enough of that, enough. Okay, well, after all that insanity with The Witcher 3, let's go see the sane world of Red Dead Redemption 2. And I'll be honest, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, as it's exactly the same situation as Tomb Raider. Every time we try and increase the FPS multiplier, we see a loss in FPS. I've got the video there in the background. It's not very exciting. This is our RX460 because, much like Tomb Raider with our GTX980, the game simply crashes. So yeah, this has not worked out as well as I'd hoped. On reflection, we've seen that if a game has FSR framegen natively supported, it can work really quite well, like Space Marine 2. Or it can do virtually nothing at all, like Cyberpunk, or you could just get a black screen, like Indie. And if you want to use a third-party tool like Lossless scaling or its Linux equivalent, that seems to open up a portal to the plane of insanity. Now, of course, that is only the results I've tested here on this very limited set of games on this one configuration of Kubuntu, and this hardware configuration. You know, PCs are wonderful things. There are millions of configurations and there are hundreds of Linux distros. And of course, there is still Windows that apparently some people still use. My point is, your mileage may vary. Don't take this as gospel that this will happen if you use lossless scaling. Like I said, a friend of mine used it on his Steam Deck. He says it works amazingly. It just didn't work out that way for me right now. So, okay, would I use framegen in my games? No, probably not, frankly. It does feel a little bit odd to me. I can't quite put my finger on what the issue is, but it's not something I'd use, I don't think. Well, that's about all the rambling time I've got today, so it only remains for me to say thank you so much for watching, and please come back and join me, TC, for another ramble very soon.